Hi, I'm Stephen with AlbertaUrbanGarden.ca. Today I thought I would answer some of the questions that I get most commonly on some of my more popular videos. Links to all the videos I'm referring to can be found in the description below or at the end of this video. The first question is, if you don't use Epsom salt or compost teas, how do you replace the magnesium, sulfur, and other nutrients in potted plants during the growing season? I don't generally support the use of compost teas or Epsom salt in the garden. There are many claims made about them, however, most of these claims are not supported by scientific evidence. In containers, unlike in raised beds, the limited volume of soil does lend itself to nutrient depletion. I address this in 3 ways. I grow in larger containers when possible, as it increases the volume of soil, compost, and subsequently the available nutrients for your plants throughout the season. I also usually make my potting soil from about 50% compost. Commercial potting soils usually do have some good nutrients in them, however, they're in very low quantities. The higher compost content of my soil mixture increases the available nutrients throughout the season. After planting, I top dress the containers with compost and the same mulch materials I use in the garden, such as autumn leaves, used coffee grounds, and eggshells, among many others. They will break down over the season, releasing their nutrients as well. You can speed this along if you find worms and add them to your containers. If you have some undecomposed compost, you can put it in the bottom of your containers, similar to a trench composting method, as long as you have between 30 centimeters or about 12 inches of soil and finished compost on top. What this undecomposed compost will do throughout the season is decompose and release its nutrients to the plants. As you can see, this approach works quite well, and throughout the season, I do not need to add any Epsom salt, compost tea, or store-bought fertilizers to my containers. At the end of the year, I usually take the soil from the containers that I've grown annuals in and use it to either top off raised beds that have sunken during the growing season, or I add it to my compost pile, which inoculates it with beneficial bacteria and allows me to recycle that soil and compost for next year. The next most common type of question that I get is about learning to grow indoors, and it's usually something around this. I'm just starting out growing indoors. What light should I buy, and how do I set up my indoor grow up? As many of you know, I live in Zone 3, and as such, my season starts in April to May and generally ends abruptly in late September or early October. As such, I usually have about a 6-month period where I can grow indoors. Growing indoors does not have to cost a lot and can be quite enjoyable. If you do not have a south or southwest facing window, grow lights can be used. The lights I use are not special by any means. They are just regular shop lights from a hardware store with bulbs that are the highest watt that I can find of either a 2100 Kelvin or 6500 Kelvin rating. Philips has even made this much easier to get the right bulb, as they have a shop light style bulb that is simply called Plant and Aquarium. This bulb works great as it has peaks in both of the best Kelvin ratings for plant growth. If you have any general questions about growing indoors, check out the playlist at the end of this video and in the description below. This segues nicely into my next most common question. Does pepper pruning really work to increase harvests? And the short answer is absolutely. I usually start my peppers indoors after the end of the preceding season. I do this because peppers are a slower plant to get going, and this allows me time to prune them. Pruning is simple. As the plant grows, you clip right above a leaf node. This will spur side growth of 2 new stems. This can be done as many times as you wish. I usually stop pruning 6 to 8 weeks before the expected last frost date. This gives the plant time to grow prior to going outside for the season. I do this because after I get them outside and they begin fruiting, they don't grow much more. This year I was able to harvest my first crop in June, and they will continue to produce right until the last frost in the fall. I don't generally worry about how the plants look as they produce, as the stress is said to improve the flavor of the peppers. This year, while I was away for business for a week, the plants continued to grow and actually produced fruit that I was able to harvest while these plants were still indoors. Pruning peppers makes it easy for me to get small and medium-bodied peppers to fruit heavily throughout the season. This is especially nice as peppers are a tropical plant and don't usually do well in my Zone 3 garden without this method. Following the video blog that I did this spring chronicling the workshop that I held at Greenland Garden Center, a lot of you guys had expressed interest in an online version of that. As this is my first online live session, I thought I would start with a Q&A and do it at about 3 p.m. Mountain Central Time on a Friday afternoon. In order to judge interest on live participants, I'd love to know in the comment section below if that time would work for you. And if you can't make that time, the video will be made available on my channel afterwards. Thank you for joining me today, and keep those questions coming. I love to help, and it really helps me guide the videos that I make for you. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you can catch all future episodes.